My girlfriend wanted an open relationship with my best friend, but I did this to her. Hello, read it. If you had told me a year ago that my relationship would collapse because of a single conversation, I wouldn't have believed you. I would have laughed, shrugged it off, maybe even argued against it. I would have told you that Emily and I were solid, unshakable, the kind of couple that made sense. We weren't just together, we fit. We had history, deep roots, a connection built over years. That's what I thought love was. That's what I believed in. I was wrong. My name is Daniel, and I'm 26 years old. 5 years ago, when I was just 21, I met Emily in college. She was the kind of person you noticed in a crowd. Loud in a way that was magnetic, the kind of beauty that seemed effortless. But it wasn't just that. She had this energy about her, like she was always a few steps ahead of everyone else, like she was in on a joke no one else had caught yet. I fell fast, and I fell hard. She had that rare ability to make you feel like you were the only person in the room, the only one who mattered. And for the first time in my life, I felt like I had something real, something that wasn't temporary. The first year of our relationship was electric. The kind of love that keeps you up at night, that makes everything else feel like background noise. I was obsessed with her, and she was obsessed with me. We talked about the future like it was a given, made promises we had no reason to doubt. It was good, more than good. It was the kind of love you think is invincible. But love isn't invincible. It's fragile, a slow-burning wick that can go out before you even realize it's fading. I didn't notice the shift at first. It happened gradually, in the little things, the way she started checking her phone more often, the way she hesitated before saying I love you, the way she kissed me like she was thinking about something else. I chalked it up to stress, to routine, to the natural ebb and flow of a long-term relationship. I told myself it was normal. It wasn't. It started with little things, changes so small they were easy to ignore. She began spending more time away from home, suddenly having plans that didn't include me. She started dressing differently, paying more attention to her appearance in ways that she hadn't before. At first, I told myself it was nothing, that I was imagining it. People grow, people change, and maybe she just wanted to take better care of herself. But then the late nights became more frequent. The phone calls that she ignored, the texts she never answered, the way she would slip her phone out of sight whenever I walked into the room. I told myself not to overthink it, that I was just being paranoid. But paranoia has a way of gnawing at you, of whispering in your ear until you can't ignore it anymore. The night everything changed. She sat me down on the couch with a look in her eyes that made my stomach twist. She wasn't angry. She wasn't upset. If anything, she looked excited, like she had been waiting for this. She told me she wanted an open relationship. At first, I thought I misheard her. Open meant other people. It meant she wanted to be with someone else, not just physically, but emotionally, intimately. And she was telling me this like it was a casual conversation, like she was suggesting we try a new restaurant for dinner. I should have been furious. Maybe I was somewhere deep inside, but it was buried under something heavier, disbelief, confusion. I asked her why. She had answers. Too many, in fact. She had been thinking about this for a while. She loved me, but she felt like she was missing out on experiences. She wanted to see what else was out there while still keeping what we had. She framed it like an opportunity, something that could strengthen us, as if inviting other people into our relationship was the key to making it stronger. It was rehearsed, and that's what made my stomach turn. She had planned this, thought about it, maybe even talked to someone about it, maybe even him. I asked if there was someone else. She hesitated. A half-second delay, the flicker of something in her expression. Then, no, of course not. Lies. I had known Emily long enough to recognize the way her jaw tensed, the way she averted her gaze just slightly before forcing herself to meet mine. She wasn't suggesting this because of some philosophical revelation about love. She was suggesting it because she already had someone in mind. Something inside me cracked. But I didn't argue. I didn't yell. I didn't call her out, even though I wanted to. Instead, I nodded. I told her I needed time to process it. And she smiled, actually smiled, as if that meant we were on the same page. She had no idea what she had just done. The next few weeks were like watching a car crash in slow motion. I saw it happening, felt it happening, but I didn't stop it. Emily started staying out later. She had new friends she was spending time with, people I had never heard of before, people whose names she dropped casually into conversation without ever giving me any real details. She started dressing differently, wearing perfume that wasn't meant for me, laughing at texts she never shared. She thought she was subtle. She wasn't. I could see it in her eyes every time she looked at me. She thought she had won, that I would fall in line, that I would accept whatever scraps of affection she decided to throw my way while she went off and explored her so-called freedom. But she underestimated me, because I wasn't going to beg. I wasn't going to argue. I wasn't going to be the heartbroken boyfriend she expected me to be. No, if she wanted an open relationship, I was going to give her one. But I would play the game better. And I knew exactly where to start. It wasn't immediate. I waited. I let her get comfortable. Let her think she had all the power. I watched as she left the house, wearing clothes I had never seen before, coming home hours later without a single explanation. I watched her smile at her phone in ways she no longer smiled at me. Saw the excitement in her eyes when she got ready to go out. Saw the way that excitement disappeared the moment she came back home. She thought I was oblivious. She thought I was too in love with her to question what was right in front of me. But I saw everything, and I remembered every single moment. I wasn't stupid. I knew what she was doing, and I knew exactly who it was with. She thought she had been careful, but she hadn't been careful enough. People talk. Friends talk. And I had always been good at paying attention to the details. The glances, the hesitations, the shifts in conversation whenever I was around. It was all there. The answer had been staring me in the face the whole time. She had picked someone close, someone convenient, someone who had been waiting for their chance just as long as she had been waiting for an excuse. But if she thought she was the only one capable of making a move, she was wrong. If she wanted to open the door, I was going to walk through it. And I was going to make sure she regretted every single second of it. Emily thought she had me figured out. She thought she knew exactly how I would react, how I would adjust, how I would mold myself to fit into the new reality she had created. She believed that I would sit quietly, that I would nod along, that I would watch as she slipped away from me piece by piece and accept it with a weak, defeated smile. She thought I would be the kind of man who swallowed his pride for love, who pretended not to see the obvious signs, who would cling desperately to whatever version of our relationship she decided to leave me with. But she was wrong. She had no idea what she had started. I didn't make a move right away. That would have been too obvious. I needed to give her time, needed to let her feel safe in the illusion she had created. So, I waited. I watched. I let her come home late. Let her ignore my messages. Let her tell me about her new experiences in a voice laced with forced enthusiasm. I let her think that I was going along with it, that I was struggling but ultimately willing to accept the new terms she had set for our relationship. I acted hurt, but understanding. Conflicted, but open-minded. I let her think she had won. She started coming home later than ever. At first, it was just an hour or two past when she said she would be back. Then it turned into full nights. She would slip into bed next to me hours before sunrise, her perfume laced with scents that weren't hers, her skin carrying the faintest trace of cologne that wasn't mine. I never asked where she had been. I never demanded answers. I let her think that my silence was surrender. And the more she believed it, the bolder she became. She stopped hiding her phone. She left it face up on the table, letting notifications roll in, letting names I had never heard before flash across the screen. She started talking about the people she was meeting, the fun she was having, the freedom she was embracing. She framed it as something positive, something that could help us grow. She said she was happier than she had ever been. That was the moment I knew she had completely convinced herself that I was too weak to do anything about it. But she wasn't the only one who had been making moves. Emily had underestimated me in the worst way possible. She thought I was incapable of detaching, that my love for her would keep me in place, that I would never be able to step outside of what we had built. She thought that I wouldn't dare. But I had been playing a different game, and unlike her, I had taken the time to consider every move carefully. While she had been busy convincing herself that I was still clinging to her, I had been laying the groundwork for my next step. I didn't pick just anyone. That would have been easy, but easy wasn't the goal. If I was going to do this, if I was going to show her just how wrong she had been about me, I needed to make it hurt. I needed to make it personal. I needed to make sure that when she finally realized what had happened, she would feel it deep in her bones. So, I chose the one person she never would have expected. The one person she trusted. The one person she would have bet everything on. I chose her best friend. It wasn't difficult. Emily had unknowingly handed me every opportunity one needed. While she had been busy with her newfound freedom, her best friend, Olivia, had been watching from the sidelines. Unlike Emily, Olivia noticed things. She noticed the way my jaw tensed when Emily talked about the men she was meeting. She noticed the way my fingers curled into my palm when Emily laughed about her nights out, the way my expression darkened when she casually mentioned how much fun she was having without me. Olivia saw it all, and she understood. She had been the one to reach out first. A message here and there, checking in, asking how I was holding up. At first I ignored it, but then I realized what she was offering. An opening. A perfect, undeniable opportunity to turn everything around. So, I responded. I told her I was fine. That was the first lie. I told her I appreciated her concern. That was the second. I let her believe that I was struggling but coping, that I was heartbroken but surviving, that I was slowly coming to terms with what Emily wanted. And just like that, Olivia became my confidant. It was too easy. Olivia had been Emily's best friend for years, but I had always sensed something lingering just beneath the surface. A quiet, unspoken tension. A subtle but undeniable attraction. She had always been careful, always respectful of boundaries. But there had been moments, fleeting glances, small hesitations, the way her eyes lingered on me just a second too long. Emily had never noticed, but I had. And now, with Emily off exploring her freedom, Olivia no longer had a reason to hold back. At first, it was innocent, or at least it looked that way. We met for coffee, sat across from each other, and talked about Emily, about how much she had changed, about how neither of us had seen this coming. Olivia played her part well, supportive, understanding, sympathetic. She told me that she didn't agree with what Emily was doing, that she thought it was reckless, selfish. She said she didn't understand how Emily could throw away something so solid, so real. She told me that if it had been her, she never would have done this to me. That was all I needed to hear. I let Olivia think that she was the one making the decisions, that she was the one blurring the lines, that she was the one initiating something neither of us had planned for. I let her believe that we were just two people finding comfort in each other's company, two people caught in the aftermath of Emily's choices. And it worked. She started leaning in closer when we talked, her hand lingering on mine for just a second longer than necessary. She laughed at my jokes in a way that was different from before, softer, more intimate. Emily had set the rules, and I was simply following them. She had given herself permission to step outside of our relationship, to seek out experiences she felt she was missing. She had wanted the freedom to explore without consequences, without guilt. But what she had never considered was that the same freedom she had claimed for herself applied to me as well. She had believed that I would sit idly by, waiting for her to return, waiting for her to decide whether or not I was still enough for her. She had never imagined that I would take her rules and use them against her. She had never considered that I might find something or someone better. And she had never, not in her wildest dreams, thought that the person I would choose would be Olivia. This wasn't just about revenge. This wasn't just about getting back at Emily for what she had done. This was about taking control, about showing her that actions have consequences, that choices have weight. She had spent weeks believing that she was untouchable, that she held all the power. But she was wrong, because now, for the first time since this had all started, I had something she didn't. An advantage. And I was going to use it. Emily had spent weeks believing she had won. She thought she had rewritten the rules of our relationship, that she had shattered the foundation of what we were and built something entirely in her favor. She had convinced herself that I was still the same man I had always been, the one who loved her unconditionally, the one who would wait, who would endure, who would let her take what she wanted without consequences. She thought I was weak. She thought I was predictable. She thought she could step away, taste whatever excitement she craved, and return to find me right where she had left me, arms open, heart aching, ready to forgive. But she was wrong, because while she had been busy playing her little game, I had been setting the stage for something she never saw coming. Olivia had become more than just a pawn in my revenge. She had become a willing participant, an unexpected ally in the silent war Emily had unknowingly started. What had begun as careful, calculated moves, coffee dates, long conversations, lingering glances had escalated into something more. The shift had been gradual, almost imperceptible, but once it happened, there was no going back. It was Olivia who leaned in first, Olivia who let the tension between us break, Olivia who made it clear that whatever boundaries had existed before no longer mattered. And I let it happen. Emily had underestimated how easily things could slip out of her control. She had assumed that I would always be beneath her, waiting, desperate for her affection. She had assumed that Olivia would always be loyal, that she would remain on the sidelines, a passive observer rather than an active player. She had never considered that Olivia might have been waiting for this opportunity. That maybe, just maybe, she had been hoping for it. The first time Olivia and I crossed that final line, it was quiet, almost inevitable. There was no hesitation, no second-guessing. It wasn't about love, not yet. It wasn't even about attraction, though that had always been there, simmering beneath the surface. It was about something deeper, power, control, reclaiming something Emily had stolen from me. Olivia wanted to feel desired, wanted to feel chosen in a way Emily had never allowed her to be. And I wanted Emily to know that she was no longer the center of my world, no longer the sole architect of my emotions. I wanted her to understand that she had overplayed her hand. I didn't flaunt it. That wasn't the point. There was no need to rub it in her face, no need to be careless or reckless. Not yet. That would come later, when the timing was right. For now, I let things unfold in the shadows, just as she had done. Olivia and I moved quietly, subtly, operating within the very framework Emily had created. We met in places where we wouldn't be seen. We kept our messages brief, our interactions coded, our intentions hidden beneath layers of plausible deniability. Emily had taught me well, but secrets have a way of revealing themselves. The first crack in Emily's confidence came when she started noticing the distance between us. She had been so focused on her own new experiences, so convinced that I was too heartbroken to act, that she hadn't considered what would happen when the dynamic shifted. She expected me to be cold, bitter, maybe even resentful. What she didn't expect was indifference. I stopped asking where she was going. I stopped waiting up for her. I stopped checking my phone, stopped reacting when she mentioned the people she was seeing. At first, she seemed relieved, then confused, then irritated. This wasn't the reaction she had expected. She wanted guilt. She wanted longing. She wanted me to chase her, to fight for her, to remind her that she was still the most important thing in my life. Instead, she was met with silence. And in that silence, she began to realize that something was wrong. It didn't take long for her to start testing me. She would drop hints about the people she was seeing, waiting for a reaction that never came. She would stay out later, coming home with the expectation that I would confront her, demand answers, show her that I still cared. But I gave her nothing. She wasn't used to being ignored. She wasn't used to feeling unimportant. And for the first time, I could see the cracks forming in the confidence she had built for herself. She started watching me more closely. I could feel her eyes on me, studying, searching, trying to piece together what had changed. She asked questions she had never asked before. What had I been with? What had I been doing? Was I okay? She was trying to regain control, trying to find a way back to the dynamic she had orchestrated. But it was too late. The moment she realized something was truly wrong was the night Olivia called me while Emily was in the room. It was late. Emily had just come home from one of her nights out, her face flushed with whatever cheap thrill she had indulged in that evening. She wasn't expecting me to be awake. She wasn't expecting my phone to vibrate on the table between us. And she definitely wasn't expecting to see Olivia's name flashing across the screen. For the first time in weeks, Emily hesitated. She didn't speak, didn't move, didn't even breathe. She just stared at the screen, at the name that should have never been there, at the possibility that had never once crossed her mind. And in that moment, I saw it, the fear, the realization, the understanding that she had lost control. I didn't answer the call. I didn't need to. The damage was already done. I let the silence hang between us, let her sit with the implications of what she had just seen. She opened her mouth once, twice, but no words came out. There was nothing she could say, nothing she could ask, because she already knew the answer. She knew exactly why Olivia was calling me. And just like that, the game had changed. Emily had spent so much time believing she was the one making the choices, the one shaping the outcome. But she had failed to consider that I had been making choices of my own. She had rewritten the rules, and I had followed them to the letter. She had wanted an open relationship, and I had given her one. She had wanted freedom, and I had taken it for myself. But now, for the first time, she was seeing what that actually meant. She had assumed that I would always be waiting for her, that no matter what, I would still be hers. But as she sat there, staring at my phone, staring at Olivia's name, she finally understood. She wasn't the only one who had moved on. And now, she was the one being left behind. I had expected her to explode, to lash out, to demand answers. But she didn't. Instead, she did the one thing I never thought I would see from her. She looked afraid. Not angry. Not smug. Not victorious. Just afraid. Because for the first time, she realized that she wasn't in control anymore. And I wasn't done yet. Emily had always been good at pretending. She knew how to mask her emotions, how to manipulate a situation so that she was always the one holding the power. She had spent our entire relationship fine-tuning this skill, learning how to navigate conflicts without ever looking like she was losing control. Even when she had first told me she wanted an open relationship, she had spoken with a practiced calmness, as if she had already decided how I would react before I even had the chance to process it. She had always assumed that she was the smartest person in the room, that no matter what happened, no matter what decisions she made, she would always be the one with the upper hand. But the night Olivia's name flashed across my phone screen, something changed. For the first time, the mask cracked. She wasn't just caught off guard. She was shaken. Emily didn't say anything that night. She sat there in silence, her fingers twitching slightly, her lips pressed together, as if she was trying to figure out what the right move was. I could see the wheels turning in her head, the calculations being made, the strategy forming behind her eyes. But no matter how hard she tried to compose herself, she couldn't hide the way her breathing had changed, the way she swallowed just a little too hard, the way her gaze lingered on me for longer than usual. She wanted to ask. She wanted to demand an explanation, to accuse me, to confirm her worst fear. But she didn't, because asking would mean admitting that it bothered her. And Emily never admitted weakness. She thought she could ignore it. That was her first mistake. In the days that followed, I could feel her watching me more closely than ever. She was no longer distant, no longer indifferent. She started paying attention again, started studying me in a way she hadn't in weeks. She had expected me to be broken, to be waiting for her, to be clinging to the hope that she would eventually come back to me when she was done with whatever she was chasing. But now, for the first time, she was realizing that I had moved on before she even had the chance to look back. And it was driving her insane. At first, she tried to be subtle. She started asking vague questions, fishing for information in ways that she thought wouldn't be obvious. She would mention Olivia's name casually, as if she was just making conversation, waiting for me to slip up. She would study my face whenever I checked my phone, searching for a reaction that would confirm what she already knew. She started staying home more often, canceling plans she had once been so eager to make. It was pathetic, watching her scramble to regain control, watching her slowly realize that the power she had once held over me was slipping through her fingers. Then, the desperation set in. She started trying to insert herself back into my life in ways that were so transparent it was almost laughable. She would sit closer to me on the couch, letting her hand rest on my leg just a second too long. She started complimenting me more, forcing laughter at jokes that weren't funny, acting as if we were still the same couple we had been before she decided to blow everything up. She even tried to bring up old memories, as if nostalgia alone would be enough to undo what she had done. But I didn't play along. I let her talk, let her touch me, let her pretend, but I never gave her what she was looking for. No affection, no words, no sign that I still cared. She was losing, and she knew it. The breaking point came one night when I came home late. I had been with Olivia. I didn't hide it. I didn't sneak around like Emily had. I walked through the door without an ounce of guilt, without hesitation, without looking like a man who had anything to explain. And that was what finally shattered her composure. She was waiting for me, sitting on the edge of the couch, her arms crossed, her leg bouncing with restless energy. Her eyes were red, her expression tight, and for the first time in weeks, she looked genuinely upset. Not smug, not victorious, just angry. She had spent so much time trying to convince herself that she didn't care, that she was the one in control, but now, with every hour that passed, she was realizing the truth. She had never expected to lose me. She had assumed I would always be there, waiting, hoping, longing for her return. But now, as she sat there staring at me like I was a stranger, she finally understood. She wasn't the one pulling the strings anymore. Emily had made a mistake when she had pushed me aside, assuming I would always be hers. She had made a mistake when she had assumed she could dictate the terms of our relationship and that I would blindly accept them. And now, as she sat there, watching me with a mixture of resentment and disbelief, she was realizing just how badly she had miscalculated. She tried to act like she was unaffected. She tried to keep her voice steady, to ask where I had been with forced casualness, to pretend like she wasn't unraveling right in front of me. But the moment I told her I had been with Olivia, she lost it. She wanted to act like it didn't matter, like she had given me permission, like this was exactly what she had wanted. But her reaction betrayed her. Her breathing turned uneven, her hands clenched into fists, her jaw locked so tight, I thought she might break her own teeth. She wanted to scream, wanted to lash out, wanted to call me a hypocrite. But she couldn't, because the moment she had asked for an open relationship, she had lost the right to be angry. She had rewritten the rules. I had simply followed them. But this wasn't just about following rules. This wasn't just about evening the playing field. This was about watching her crumble under the weight of her own choices. She had wanted freedom, had demanded it, had insisted that this was what was best for both of us. And now, as she sat there, struggling to process the reality of what that actually meant, I could see the regret flickering behind her eyes. But it was too late. I walked past her without another word, leaving her sitting there in silence, her world crashing down around her. And for the first time since this had all started, I felt something close to satisfaction. Because now, she was the one left behind. Emily had always been the one in control. She had built our relationship around the assumption that I would always follow her lead, that no matter what she did, no matter how much she took, I would always be there, waiting for her. And for a long time, she was right. I had given her everything, my trust, my loyalty, my unwavering devotion. But she had made a mistake. She had assumed that love and submission were the same thing. She had assumed that I would never learn how to play her game. And now, as she sat in the wreckage of the world she had created, I could see the truth dawning on her. She had spent so much time believing that she was the one making the moves, but she had never realized that I had been playing my own game all along. And now it was over. In the days following that night, Emily tried to hold on to what little control she had left. At first, she acted like nothing had changed. She carried on as if my relationship with Olivia didn't bother her, as if it was nothing more than a minor inconvenience. She still went out, still dressed up, still pretended that she was living the life she had always wanted. But the mask was slipping. She wasn't as confident as she had been before. The way she spoke had changed. The way she looked at me had changed. I could feel the desperation beneath the surface, the way her eyes lingered on me just a little too long, the way she hesitated before leaving the house. She was waiting for me to crack, waiting for me to tell her that I still wanted her, that Olivia was just a distraction, that I was only doing this to make her jealous. But I wasn't. Then she tried to provoke me. She started bringing up the men she had been with, dropping their names like they meant something to her, watching me carefully for any sign of a reaction. But I gave her nothing. I let her talk, let her try to make me jealous, let her act like she was still the one in control. But the more she pushed, the more obvious it became that she was the only one still playing. And that was when she finally broke. She confronted me one night, her composure barely holding together. She accused me of leading Olivia on, of using her to get back at her, of pretending to be something I wasn't. I could see it in her eyes, the anger, the frustration, the regret. She wanted me to admit that I still loved her. She wanted me to tell her that none of this meant anything, that I was just trying to hurt her. She wanted me to give her an out, a way to rewrite the narrative so that she wasn't the one who had destroyed what we had. But I didn't. I told her the truth. I told her that she had wanted an open relationship, and that I had given her exactly what she had asked for. I told her that I had moved on, that Olivia wasn't just a way to get back at her, that I had found something real. I told her that she wasn't the center of my world anymore, that I didn't need her, that I was done playing her games. And for the first time in our entire relationship, Emily had nothing to say. She stood there, her mouth open, her hands shaking slightly, as if she had never once considered the possibility that I could exist without her. She had built her entire identity around the idea that she was irreplaceable, that no matter what she did, I would always be waiting for her. But now, as she stood there looking at me, she finally understood. She had lost me, but the final blow didn't come from me. It came from Olivia. Emily had assumed that Olivia had been nothing more than a pawn in my game, that she had been just another piece on the board. But she had underestimated her, just as she had underestimated me. Olivia wasn't just a bystander in all of this. She had been watching, waiting, learning, and when the moment came, she struck in a way that even I hadn't expected. She cut Emily out of her life completely. Emily had always relied on Olivia. She had always assumed that, no matter what happened, no matter what mistakes she made, Olivia would always be there to pick up the pieces. But Olivia had changed. She had seen who Emily really was. And when Emily came to her, looking for comfort, looking for reassurance, looking for a way to rewrite the past, Olivia did what I never could. She walked away. That was the moment Emily truly broke. I heard her crying that night, alone in our bedroom. The same bedroom where she had once planned a future with me. The same bedroom she had so casually abandoned when she decided that I wasn't enough for her. And as I listened to her sobs echo through the walls, I felt nothing. No sympathy, no regret, no desire to comfort her. She had made her choice, and now she had to live with it. The next morning, she packed her things. She didn't say a word. She didn't try to make excuses. She just left. And as I watched her walk out of my life, I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time. Relief. Emily had spent so much time believing that she was the one in control, that she was the one shaping the future. But in the end, she had been nothing more than a spectator in her own downfall. She had wanted an open relationship, and she had gotten exactly what she asked for. But she had never expected to be the one left alone. And as I closed the door behind her, I realized something. I had won.